Welcome to this episode of The Russell Brown Show. In this episode, I'm going to discuss a feature called Knockout. This feature's been around for a long time, but I have a special technique that might be of interest to you. In this project, I'm going to start with this globe. I'm going to blur the globe as you see here. I'm going to place this hand and magnifying glass over the globe. Then we're going to knock out and punch through multiple layers to give the illusion that we're magnifying this globe. And as you can see, I can move these layers around over my image to magnify different sections of the image. Now let's analyze just what's going on here. First of all, I have this topmost layer, which is a shape layer. Let's turn that off. Then below that, I have my hand and magnifying glass. Below that, I have my blur. Here's my original image I started with. And then on the base is the distortion. Notice that the base layer is a true background layer. That's the key to success when working with the Knockout feature found under the Layer Styles dialog. Because when you knock out, it knocks out through all of these layers to this base layer as we saw here. When I turn all the layers back on, you see how only the base layer appears through this window. So that's the technique. Let's start from the beginning and show you how this works. I'm going to throw away all of my existing layers that I created earlier and start with my hand layer and my original globe, just like this. Let's turn off the hand layer, target the globe layer, and let's duplicate this 3 times. Clicking on the globe layer and dragging it down to the base of the layers palette allows me to quickly and easily duplicate it by clicking and dragging it and dropping it on top of Create New Layer. Let's do that one more time. This first one here, we're going to blur. I'm going to turn off this upper layer, double click here on Original Globe Copy and rename this Blur. Then with this layer targeted, going up to Filter, Blur, and over to Gaussian Blur. In this case, I'm going to blur at about 4.5 and click OK. That's step number 1. Let's turn that layer off and target my base layer, my original globe image. This was a layer that gets distorted. Again, with that layer targeted, go up to Filter, Distort, and in this particular case, I'm going to use Pinch. The standard for a pinch is to pinch it down and make it smaller like this. But in fact, in this case, I'm going to go to about a -52 to distort this image like this. And click OK. So now we have the distortion. And of course, here's the original, and you can see the difference between the two. So that's going to be our magnification and distortion when the lens passes over the globe. Now, before I move any farther, one of the most important things is to convert my base layer, the one with the distortion, into a true background layer. To do that, I target it, go up to Layer, down to New, and over to Background from Layer. That converts it and flattens that into a solid background. Perfect. Let's turn on our blur layer, and let's turn on our hand and magnifying glass layer. Targeting the hand layer will now put in our special effects. Moving over to my tool palette, I'm going to select my ellipse tool here. Moving up to my options bar, I want to make sure that my ellipse tool is set to a shape layer right here. Then, moving into my work area, I'm going to center my cursor right in the middle of my magnifying glass, click and hold, then hold down my Option or Alt key in combination with my Shift key to constrain it to a perfect circle, and I did a pretty good job, but I'm a little bit off. I need to move it to the right. In order to move this to the right while I'm still drawing it, hold down the spacebar key in combination with your Alt or Option key and Shift key. And then you can reposition and move your ellipse or any of the shapes you're drawing, and then let go of the spacebar and continue to change its size. A great way to isolate this perfectly. As you can see here, I've just created my shape layer. It's filled with the current foreground color of black. That's not a problem. I'm going to eliminate that in my next step. Moving over here to my layers palette, I'm going to click here in this blank blue area beyond the name of this layer. By doing so, I can then bring up easily and quickly the layer style dialog. Okay, this is when the magic begins. Step number 1, going down here to advanced blending, I'm going to adjust the fill opacity to 0. Bingo. Next, down here under knockout, of course, knockout. If I click and hold here on this pop-up menu, I can select two choices, shallow or deep. In this particular project, I'm going to select a deep knockout. Selecting shallow will only knock out those elements from within a selected group. In this case, I want to knock out through all my layers and all my groups, deep knockout. And there you can see it. On your screen now, I'm knocking through all my layers to the true background layer that we created earlier, the one with the distortion. This looks great, but we need to add some additional special effects. I'm going to start here with a drop shadow. Clicking here within this dialog on drop shadow, I then have controls over it. Now, in this process, I want to make sure that my drop shadows and my other elements do not share the same lighting. So I'm going to uncheck Use Global Lighting at this time, so that each of the settings I choose will have unique lighting properties. Next, I move into my work area, click and hold, and I can move the drop shadow to any location I want, just like this. Then, I'm going to adjust the size here to soften it a bit, and the opacity down a little bit, like that. Looks great. The next thing I want to do is add some reflections and quality of glass. To do that, I'm going to use an inner shadow. Clicking here. The default for inner shadow is a mode of multiply using black. In this case, I'm going to click on the color swatch and change this to white. And change the blending mode to, of course, screen. Then again, I can move into my work area and move this screened light into position. What I want is the illusion of some reflections on the glass. Now I'm going to show you a secret I know to adjusting this screened inner shadow so it looks more like reflections on glass. It's down here under quality. First I'm selecting anti-aliased here. Then I'm going over here and clicking on this flyout arrow to choose a default contour. The one I like to choose is here. It's called Ring Double. Watch what happens inside the image area. You can barely see that, but some little rings have appeared. I'm going to move outside this selection, click, then adjust the size. There, you can more clearly see the rings are then changing in size. And I can change these rings, which are caused, of course, by the contours of this quality that I've chosen. And I can adjust those. I can even move them around. Fantastic. Next, I'm going to add a bevel emboss to bring in some shading around the edges. Clicking on bevel emboss, turning off global light again because I want it to have its unique lighting of its own. Position the lighting here. Adjust the size here. The depth here. And soften it. I'm going to soften it all the way over to 16 here. And that's looking pretty good. What else could we do to this? We could also adjust the opacity down here of the multiplied black shadow, or even the opacity of the screened highlight. Those look pretty good. Now, let's do our final touch to this. I like to add a stroke around the entire edge of this shape. By clicking down here at the base under stroke, the default for this is red. I'm going to click on this red patch and change this to black. And then I'm going to reposition it not from the outside but to be on the inside of the shape like this. It gives me a nice strong edge all the way around. 3, that works pretty well for this particular project. That's all the adjustments I need to make. You could, of course, go in and experiment with a variety of other adjustments to bring out the qualities you're looking for. But I'm going to quit at this time and click OK. Then, targeting this top layer, I can go to my Move tool and see what this looks like as I move it around. However, you'll notice that only the shape layer is moving and not the hand and magnifying glass. How do I fix that? If I hold down the Shift key, I can then add the hand tool to the current selected shapes layer. So I have a group, a temporary group of those together. I could move into my work area and move it around, and they would temporarily move together. But if I want to link them together, I move to the base of the Layers palette and click on the Link Layers icon. Now for my final touch. What can we do to animate this? It's easy. Going up to my Window menu and down to Animation, I can reveal the new Animation palette found in Photoshop CS2. Now let's position my first position right about there with my Move tool. Then going down to my Animations palette, I'm going to click here at the base of the Animations palette, Duplicate Selected Frames. So I now have 2 copies of the same set of frames. In this second frame set, I'm going to move my magnifying glass down here and position it right there. Then I'm going to select the first set again, which has the magnifying glass up here in the upper right hand corner. Then moving over here to the flyout arrow in the Animations palette, clicking and holding, I can select Tween. And of course, I can select 10 frames to have tween between those 2 frames, 1 and 2. Of course, you can see here, I can set my parameters to position, opacity, and effects. In this particular case, I'm going to leave those as they are and click OK. I now can play this. Let's set this to once and hit the play button. Unbelievable. Wow! I've just shown you a great technique that allows you to punch through multiple layers with a technique called Knockout. Then I showed you how to animate this technique using the new animation feature found in CS2. And of course, to finish this all off, if you wanted to export this as a web animation, you'd go up to your File menu and down to Save for Web. So there you have it. Knockout and animation combined together.